Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I will provide you with a very brief glimpse of the theme Respond and progress made since ASM2. First, let me start by sharing with you a few general findings concerning the Respond theme. Importantly, the number of social science projects has increased compared to previous processes of the ASM. This is a positive development. However, while interdisciplinary approaches appear more frequent, social sciences still often seem add-on. Indigenous knowledge was an important part of a quarter of all projects submitted, and 14% were considered community-driven. While there appear to be more efforts to include local or indigenous communities or perspectives, inclusion in assessment and definition of Arctic research priorities is rare. Engagement at early stages, participatory processes, and co-production of knowledge need to be normalized. Consideration of gender and diversity in leadership of and participation in project development and implementation has improved, but only marginally. Next slide. If you could please go to the next slide. Thank you. Prominent themes emerging from the Respond theme included environmental change, where we see an improvement when it comes to consideration of impacts on communities, including indigenous communities, and improvement in attempting to include indigenous people's perspectives and knowledge. However, as I said before, meaningful and early inclusion is still considerably lacking. There was governance, where there appears to be greater understanding of the need for ethical guidelines for research conducted in the Arctic, with particular attention to Arctic communities and indigenous peoples. We see more attention given to issues of health in the region, largely spearheaded by Arctic Council working groups. Also included were themes of industry, where attention is paid to social and environmental impacts of industrial development, and infrastructure, including efforts to update and provide engineering and design guidelines for Arctic and sub-Arctic infrastructures. A couple of projects are looking at risk, such as in terms of sustainable Arctic sea routes and adaptation to emerging climate change-related hazards. Some projects are exploring various dimensions of socioeconomic challenges, including seeking to better understand the potential for economic development in the North that is both sustainable and just by investigating how to reduce inequalities between Arctic stakeholders, and also addressing issues of gender equality as a fundamental component of addressing socioeconomic challenges, sustainable development, adaptive capacity, and resilience in the Arctic. Importantly, there's also increasing attention to issues of food security and in pursuing innovative avenues for food production. Next slide, please. Some highlighted science directions or needs identified under the response theme are that more attention needs to be paid to multidisciplinary, holistic, natural, and social science research and monitoring. There's a surprising lack of risk and risk assessment projects. One would have thought this to be an important factor in response, adaptation, and mitigation. There's also a surprisingly low number of projects engaging with issues of international law and governance. There's a need to encourage submissions of innovation and engineering-based projects, as these are important factors in solution-oriented approaches to adaptation and response. Response will likely become increasingly important, but only 16% of all projects submitted were categorized in the response category. This may suggest that we need to encourage further project work focusing on responding to climate change and impacts. Next slide, please. On my final note, I will share with you a few highlighted recommendations. To prioritize outcome-focused, impact-driven, results-oriented research that is based on community and regional priorities. To enhance coordination of communities or practice that link scientific, indigenous, and policy experts to enable a multinational climate change resilience assessment leading to better use of existing data, decision support, and the development of forward-looking resilient infrastructure. To institutionalize guidelines for ethical research and code of conduct, particularly pertaining to research involving or impacting local or indigenous communities. Monitoring developments in terms of gender and diversity of leadership of and participation in project development and implementation should also include consideration of diversity and gender in development of research goals and analysis. We should also consider increased engagement with youth. To enhance development of and access to online tools to facilitate community resilience and adaptation planning. To prioritize research on impacts on life-sustaining systems such as food production, hydrological conditions, to inform adaptation measures. And finally, to develop international Arctic sustainability goals. I will leave it there, and I thank you kindly for your attention.